Hey, Diane, how are you?
Okay, the only green I could find.
Oh my God. I
It's
forgot
the
all about
only
it.
green I own.
I was so happy not to go to
And
work
my
today.
Yellowstone. Yes.
Oh,
You didn't wear
forgot.
green. So.
Oh my gosh,
Good
yeah.
morning.
I
Good
bought
morning.
a Dollar Tree opened
How
up.
are you, babe?
Yeah.
It's not a dollar. They lie. It's a dollar.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
make all my
and
people-
so I got, and I forgot to give to them. I gave them
It's
her
just, wait a minute.
Oh, how cute.
So,
So since I was
Her
her this
passion,
morning, I gave her hers
A
this morning.
circle
And then I said, you see that Emily has on
the
socks,
canvas
so
and a strip.
do you want these now or
And I
later?
needlepoint
So
them
first she
both,
said I
and then
want
I
it
said,
now. You know, I think I'll take it.
Very nice.
So I'll give it to you.
He's such a cool, he's reading all the time.
Okay, is what it is.
Yeah,
A couple
so he
more.
understands.
And he understands it. I mean,
Oh, yes.
Yeah. How old is he?
Told you I
They're
you know. Everybody. I don't remember when.
oh my God, he's curious and he's, you know.
Idiot. I don't know. I'm from lower.
Good morning. Stripe, another stripe person. And so somebody else.
I know.
Natalie.
Where's
Natalie.
Natalie?
Yeah, we're the strike people.
You could sit over here if you want.
Well, that's
I wanted
between
to-
you and Rabbi. I am not getting in the middle of that.
What are you charging?
Sacrifice, except he wanted to make clothing or what? All the
It depends on-
sacrifice,
There was some.
the entire animal except for his hide
Mhm.
was burned off. So I was
You
just
know-
wondering.
Levi was the only one that got. He was the
Oh,
only one of the
Vayikra.
tribes that got
That's
a
Elliot.
name.
That's
Got a book name.
Parashat.
God, who comes,
Named
he can
after
come on
him.
Shabbat and read it for us.
That was a Jeopardy question.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That was a Jeopardy question. Jeopardy question.
What?
Which book will get the baddies for the calf, for the golden calf? And I forget how it was worded.
They were just scared out of their mind.
But every one of them got the right answer. They all knew it was Leviticus.
Levy.
Yeah. they all
Oh,
knew it.
name.
I know Vayikra, he is called, yeah. Yeah, that was, I thought, how
So
did we,
that's kind of
how
our-
did we get Leviticus from Vayikra?
Because the people naming the book.
In,
No, Elliot,
when you read in the Yetzirah, they,
To make a
I
connection
heard this one.
between
Did you have
what was named, what's
I
named.
don't
That's
wanna
what
get
I'm
into
saying.
this.
I went to the book.
So I figured.
I
Because as soon as you try that in the
I got the question.
No.
In the morning, I know the question would be.
What's funny is in the-
I don't know.
But
See?
it's.
And so every day,
I thought you were about the game show.
yeah, it's the Jeopardy game show. in the New York
I
Times.
think
I'm out in my shed, and I just forget it. I try and look it up and.
All right, I'm gonna invite us to get started. We have one person who has joined us via Zoom, so we're gonna get our Zoomiverse projection. Have just under 60 minutes to learn together. Let's make this happen.
Okay, I take it from that actually. Here. Oh boy.
We'll just keep the real life Hoovers up and running, and I'll attend to the Zoom.
Okay. So hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I admire all of you running to a class about Leviticus and Vayikra and sacrifices. I mean, really, more power to you.
It's very special.
It's
Very, very special.
Hi, how are you?
And we come
well,
for
we'll see
Rabbi
how you're
Moses.
feeling about it at the end.
Well, you know what happens if it's not special.
I'm leaving town.
No, I thought we said.
What do you care?
Oh,
But we come for Rabbi Moses.
well, Rabbi Potok, I would come in. Okay, so to be serious and hi to Stephanie, right? Okay, glad you're with us.
Oh.
So we have just been through quite the saga in the book of Exodus, in the book of Shemot, and if you're talking about names, right? So in Hebrew, the name of the book we just finished is Shemot, because the second word in the first verse is Shemot. Eila Shemot b'nei Yisrael sheyetzeu miMitzrayim, right? So the system for naming the books in Hebrew was simply to take the first like identifiable word right? So the first book is Bereshit. Then there's Eila Shemot. These are the names, right? So the next second book is Shemot. So Vayikra, it's that's why if the name of the book in Hebrew doesn't reflect the content. It's just like that's how you did a place mark back in the day. So as we talked about yesterday, we're at the end of Shemot. The tabernacle has been constructed, and all the materials were pulled together, and everything was the right measurements, and it was all just like good to go. And then we're done. So then the question is, okay, now it's up and running. What do we do with this thing, right? And that's what the book of Vayikra is about. That's what the book of Leviticus is about. It's basically a manual for the Levin. You guys are in charge of all this really important stuff, and this is how you are going to follow through and make sure that everything is done the way I, God, want it to be done. There's going to be different kinds of sacrifices for different reasons, and people are going to have to bring those sacrifices at specific times, and you're going to do this to the animal, or you're going to do that to the animal, or to the produce that they're bringing, or whatever it may be. In addition, something that we're not going to talk about today, but is worth noting is in Leviticus, is the rules of ritual purity. If you are going to participate in any of these rituals, you need to be ritually pure. If you are going to be living within the camp, you need to be ritually pure. Why do you need to be ritually pure? Because we just parked God's mobile home in the middle of the camp. And you can't be in the camp near where God's Mishkan is, where God is in proximity, if you yourself are ritually impure. So that's another whole study about what the rules of ritual impurity are. And it's not only about menstruation, but it includes menstruation. There's other things as well. And so those are all of the sorts of topics that are in the book, in the whole book of Vayikra. And I was really, but we're going to take a deep dive into just what is sacrifice, what's it all about, and why does it matter, and what was it meant to achieve? So the first thing, so if we're talking about like unsuccessful translations, right? Calling a korban a sacrifice. Okay, I was talking too loud.
No, it's the monitor.
Oh,
I have to wear a monitor, and I
Ah.
didn't realize that I can't control this monitor unless I go over there.
okay.
Don't talk about the tech, it's just, no one wants to.
I got it, okay. So one of the worst misnomers in human history is calling a korban a sacrifice. A sacrifice is well, here, let's read about it. Okay, so the very first text that we have is just a short one-liner from a Torah commentary that was written by Gunter Cloud. He was a Reform rabbi and a Reform scholar, and they published a really lovely Torah with commentary. And in that book, he writes, the term sacrifice comes from a Latin word meaning to make something holy. The most common Hebrew equivalent is korban, something brought near, that is, to the altar. So the point is that what we see as the sacrifice is not that we're making something holy, it's that this is the mechanism for bringing Israel and God closer together. L'karev is to bring something close. I am sitting karov to her. I krovat to her. I am sitting near her, right? So a korban is what brings us closer to God. And there are times when we need to make deliberate steps to bring ourselves closer to God, either as a people or as individuals based on whatever has or has not happened in our lives. So this was a beloved act from the people's point of view, because there was no other way to express affection, loyalty, remorse, good intention, except through this mechanism of sacrifice. Yes.
Well, how would you be killing something to make it holy and something that you revere?
Well, it
Taking
has.
a life to be closer to God doesn't make sense.
So the short answer is
Yes,
because God said so. Right?
sounds right.
Yeah.
I said so, that's
Yes, because I said so.
Because mother, it's the same answer we give for parenting, yeah. Because I said so.
That only worked till a certain age, if I remember
I know,
correctly.
yeah,
And-
you're right,
yeah,
you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right.
All right. So the dynamic is different than the dynamic of what we understand as sacrifice, right? And also understand that in the context of the very beginning of our people, we were doing something that was unprecedented. We were bringing a sacrifice to an invisible God, and nobody else was doing that. Everybody else was bringing sacrifices to images that they could see, that they could touch, that they could literally, physically draw near to. And we were praying to this whatever, right? That you couldn't see and you couldn't hear and you couldn't touch. And that's kind of, a huge step in human thought. One of the things that perhaps a discussion for another day is, at this point, the Israelites are not monotheists. They are not saying yet there is only one God in the world. They are saying, this is our God, you can't see our God, and we just proved that our God can go anywhere, and our God can even beat up your gods, right? And the concept of monotheism will develop over the course of the Tanakh, over the course of the whole Hebrew Bible, and then of course further on. But these very, very first steps, nobody was saying that the Egyptian gods didn't exist, right? They were just saying, our God's stronger than your God. Our God is stronger than your gods, right? Okay. So, so that's kind of the big picture of what this dynamic of sacrifice is about. So let's take a deep dive into the details, right? What sort of sacrifices are we supposed to be bringing, and why are we supposed to be bringing these sacrifices? So these are the 5 sacrifices that are going to be brought to the Mishkan. The first is the olah, or burnt offering. Something that an olah is something that goes up, and you recognize that term because when we moved to Israel, we make aliyah, right? And I, as a female person who made aliyah, I am an olah, right? And my next door neighbor who's an oleh from someplace else is an oleh, right? But so that's what the term is. It's about going up. So the olah, or burnt offering, was a voluntary sacrifice that had a high degree of sanctity and was regarded as the standard offering. The entire animal, except for its hide, was burnt on the altar, a pleasing odor before God. So one of the things to note is a pleasing odor before God is not necessarily a pleasing odor for people. Right? And there are written things about what it smelled like over there. And I mean, maybe in the middle of the wilderness, it wasn't so bad because there was lots of fresh air. But once they were in the temple, it might not have been quite so pleasant. For a very short time, there was an English newspaper other than the Jerusalem Post. I forgot the name of it. And in one of their
International Herald.
No, it was some independent something or other, and their, the Israeli version of the Sunday magazine was the Friday magazine. So in the Friday magazine, what would the reality be if we really did build the third temple? Because everybody needs to bring certain sacrifices at certain times. And every Jew is supposed to show up in Jerusalem for the 3 pilgrimage festivals, which would be millions and millions of people would be showing up in Jerusalem. And whatever viaducts they would build for the blood to go streaming through would not be enough. And there would just be blood spilling all over the streets because there would be millions of people and and it's like
A lot of goats.
lot of goats, right?
Oh,
Yes, and bulls, and let's just not go. Anyway, so it was this brilliant article because it was about the reality of what all these people are who are the third temple. Like, could you just stop and think a minute about what you're really asking for here, right? I don't know.
Okay,
Continue. No, actually, I never thought of that.
Emily,
Yes.
My husband, he wasn't there, but he's a Kohanim, and he says all those Kohens needed food.
Yes.
he wasn't there.
Really?
I heard that, he wasn't there.
The Kohanim were taken care of very well.
I could see that for all these tithing.
Well, some of it was stuff they ate, and some of it was stuff that was entirely burnt up, right?
That's what I was going to ask.
But also, not all of the Kohanim were on the job at the same time. They worked in rotations, and they lived in towns all around the country once they got to the land of Israel. And then the locals had to take care of the Kohanim. So tell your husband they were covered. It was good, right?
That's his explanation for the use of the food afterward.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, some of it was definitely, some of it was all burnt up, and some of it they did get pieces of.
and who was assigned to take the hide? I mean, that if I remember correctly from
Everybody's worrying
reading
about the fur coat.
about the rest, the taking the hide off and all was not a good job.
So it was either the junior Kohen or the guy people were mad at, or I don't know. I mean, it was sacred work, so it was all considered to be part of sacred work. And the hide wasn't the only yucky thing involved, right? I mean, there was a lot of blood and guts and whatever.
Not to, but anyway, but is there any explanation of why except for the hide? I mean, there's a lot of part of the animal that's kind of yucky.
Right.
But why does it identify not except for the hide? Is there any explanation?
So I have to admit, I didn't look it up.
Okay.
just didn't occur to me.
There must be a
to-
reason, but.
Yeah, there must be a reason. Or, yeah.
Sue thought maybe it
Not
was
edible.
used for clothing and so that they didn't wanna, like they.
Perhaps.
Does it get that cold in Israel?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yes, it snows.
I don't know. I don't know.
It snows.
Really, really? Oh,
Yeah.
and that makes sense.
Okay, we have more offerings. We have.
It snows in Jerusalem every 5 years,
Oh.
2 inches.
And there is.
And the whole
No,
city
no,
stops.
there was a lot of snow where we were after we
Okay.
left.
If we have time, I'll tell you my snow story. Okay, so the second offering, and this word will be familiar, is the mincha, the meal offering. What's mincha in our terms? Exactly, which is the afternoon service, right? Good. So the mincha or meal offering was a sacrifice made of flour, oil, salt, and frankincense, which was supposed to make it smell better. That was partly burned on the altar and partly given to the priests to eat. The meal offering was considered the most holy because it could only be eaten by the priests and only within the precincts of the sanctuary. Levin was omitted from all meal offerings. Honey was not permitted because it putrefies. Salt was supposed to be used in meal offerings because it prevents putrefaction. Putrefaction symbolizes moral degradation, and salt symbolizes that which is lasting, such as our covenant with God. Because we all know that salt preserves stuff.
Wait a minute, honey putrefies? I thought honey was the most lasting of all food.
Yeah, you're right. But the thing to remember is what we call honey today is not what it was.
It was dates.
It was date
Yeah.
syrup.
So
Oh,
the honey that we enjoy it doesn't.
it's bee honey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back in the day, honey, what they call honey is what we would call date syrup in Hebrew, it's silan. But that's, and that if it's around long enough, yeah, get lucky.
I don't know what to use it for. I
Ceylon?
have date syrup.
Oh, I use it on everything. Oh my gosh, it's awesome.
I had it in a recipe, that's why I know.
They're in
Yeah.
recipes all over the place, date syrup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what you could try to do is any recipe that calls for honey, just use the
Just
date
use-
syrup instead. And you
Yeah.
know, it's not as sweet, but it's kind of like a deeper flavor. It's okay. We should forget that. Off the beaten track, but it's
We're in
it's
food.
delicious.
Yes.
Right, yeah. Right.
Into food.
Yeah.
It's just-
And there's a that grows organic dates, and they make the date syrup from the organic dates. Okay, good. All right. So third sacrifice, the zevach shlamim, or the sacrifice of well-being, was a voluntary animal offering from one's herd, sometimes brought to fulfill a vow. So somebody might take a vow, obligating themselves to do something or to not do something. And in order to express their intention to fulfill the vow, they will bring a zevach shlamim, a sacrifice of being shalem, of being whole, right? And that's what that is about. The fourth is the chatat, the sin offering. A chet is a sin, right? And we stand at Yom Kippur, and chatan lefanecha, we have sinned before you, right? So the chatat or sin offering was an obligatory sacrifice that was offered to expiate unintentional sins by a community of kohanim, the head of the community, or an individual. This was also the offering required of one who had withheld testimony, touched something impure, or failed to fulfill an oath. This offering differs from the others in the special treatment of the blood of the animal. And if you want to read about that, turn to Leviticus 4:1-5:13, and you'll see what they did with the blood. But the point is that that there are different levels of transgression. And this chatat offering was for the less bad stuff, right? The things that are mentioned are if you withheld testimony, you touched something impure, or failed to fulfill an oath. So withholding testimony, there are there are positive statements in the Torah and positive statements in the early texts that say that you are obligated to testify if you know something. And if you don't, then you have to go through a process of tshuva. And you have to own the fact that you fell short in passing on information that you were obligated to convey. Largely, this is about making sure that the people of Israel can rely on each other and can trust each other. And if I need you to speak up on my behalf because you know that I didn't do what right, or that somebody else did something to me and you know, and you didn't speak up on my behalf, you are letting down the team, right? So the kind of general direction of a lot of these sacrifices is making sure that the Israelites are owning owning that they have a shared fate and a shared stake in what goes on, and to build community, to understand that everybody is responsible for everybody else. So if you fall short in doing something important that would help to support an individual, or that would help to shore up the integrity of the whole, then you have to make tshuva for that. You have to bring sacrifice. Right. Number 5, the asham. The asham is the penalty offering. The penalty offering was an obligatory sacrifice of a ram that was required chiefly of one who had committed robbery or fraud, or the misappropriation of property designated for the tabernacle. So these are more severe infractions, and so the penalty offering is a more severe. The asham is a more severe. Asham means to be guilty, right? And again, it's in our liturgy for the high holidays. Ashamnu, bagadnu, gadalnu, right? So those are the major categories. Yes.
I have a question about the blood of the animal being sprinkled in holy places, and we are not supposed to eat animals that still have blood in them.
Correct.
When we cook. So
Correct.
I don't understand. I've never understood that.
What is it that you don't understand?
Taking something that is impure,
Mm-hmm.
the blood of an animal, and sprinkling it in the holy places of the temple. I don't understand that.
So it's not about pure and impure. Blood is life force, right? So if you're taking the blood from this animal that's being sacrificed and you're sprinkling the blood on the altar, you are bringing the life force of that animal back to its creator. We have, as you said, we have a very different association with blood. From a kosher butcher, you had to salt it yourself.
Yes.
Right, and you had to extract the blood, whatever was left yourself. Right now, they kind of do it for you. But we we're counting on them saying, doing what they said they're doing. So our association with blood is like, right? It's yucky. It's because it represents the life force of the animal, and because we are eating a creature that God created, we are meant to be respecting the life force of that animal, and that's why we don't eat the blood.
But if I go to a kosher restaurant and I ask for a rare hamburger, they give me a rare hamburger.
But it's a rare hamburger from meat that's already been soaked and salted. But you can't get 100% of the red out, right? But they've done the soaking and the salting.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead and enjoy.
No, I did. I did. I went to La Golondrina, La Gondola, and I did.
good.
So when people did these sacrifices, were they told to do them by the whatever the law is at the time, or did they? So I'm just thinking like the last two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does someone who didn't testify then just bring a sacrifice because like, then they're admitting to what they didn't do.
Right.
Was there any sort of, I don't know, anyone making them do that, or was it just?
Yeah, so, whoever was counting on their testimony, for example, could go to one of the Levin and say, look, this guy knows really what happened because he was there and he didn't say anything, and he's like really hurting me because he didn't say anything, and I just like want you to know. And then the Levite will go to, or the Kohen will go to the guy and say, your goat. So
Don't testify, just bring the code.
yeah, right. Either testify or bring the goat, or I mean, it might be a done deal already and it's too late to testify, but it's people talk, right? And and information goes up the food chain, and sooner or later somebody acts on whatever the information is.
My question is the economics of the whole thing. If I'm in the upper middle class, I'm going to have a nice herd, and I can afford to sacrifice a goat. But if I'm, say, in the middle class or in the lower middle class, I mean, there's got to be classes in the ancient world as there are in today's world. And what has always bothered me about all of these sacrifices, and I know that there is a substitution of the grain and the flour but they're you have a little partridge and turtle dove and so
what's bothering you?
Well, that so in other words, we can slip in something else.
I think Diane wants to know what happens to the person that doesn't have a goat to sacrifice.
That's right, exactly.
So
There's
the
the flour.
Torah
Thank you for that.
explicitly says, this is just the categories, right? But as you work your way through the book of Vayikra, they go into the weeds about every single one of these sacrifices and how they are to be conducted.
And I remember reading all that.
And so over and over again, it'll say, and if he doesn't have enough for a cow, or doesn't have enough for a goat, so he can bring a bird, he can bring some grain, he can bring whatever. And the sacrifice is considered to be completely equal in terms of its efficacy, no matter what the person brings. The person brings what that person has the means to bring.
So that is implied only, because it always has bothered
It's
me.
not implied.
It's
not implied. It is stated outright.
Yeah.
There is acknowledgement from the very beginning that not everybody has the same resources, and that nobody is left out because they don't have the resources of the wealthier neighbor. I'm actually kind of proud of that, right? Nobody was dissed for not having a cow up their sleeve. They had
but even for people in, say, the middle class, I mean, to have an extra bowl or an extra, so they didn't have to. You bring something else. So you bring what you can afford to bring.
Yeah, that has always, and that is not, that's not commentary. That is explicitly in the text.
And no one said, oh, but Suzanne, I mean, you couldn't afford an extra cow.
Well,
that I always thought of that. Yeah, it's to me it's very it is a very human.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that
you mean Jews are Jews no matter what.
Yeah, the asham
That's right.
or the penalty offering.
Yes.
The asham or penalty offering, was that part of a trial that they had been found guilty?
There would have been some
and therefore
process.
they had to.
Yes.
This was a penalty. It says penalty offering.
Yeah, absolutely. There would have been some process. Somebody would have come to the Levim or the Kohanim or whoever and said this happened. and there's also text about you have to come to shul. And you have to really pay attention to the Torah readings for the next 10 weeks. Because you're going to see all of this.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Okay, then instead of daydreaming.
I the second row, I listen.
Well, then it's all, you're gonna see it's all there. They're gonna
test you on
say,
it later, Mike. So
somebody
this is
goes
why
and
we
they
come
say,
on
"You
Sunday
say-
morning."
the Kohanim and Levin process it, they say to the person who has done the deed, you are to bring this. And if you can't bring this, you can bring this. And if you can't bring that, you can bring that. Whatever. Yeah.
And you spend too much time collecting the money too.
No, that's during minions. And we read the first three of every single time, I know it.
Okay.
That's minions.
I want to make a real brief comment. Last night,
Yes.
those who were there, you talked about community.
Yeah.
And I would think this is a larger community that has to deal with these. So people would know.
Yes.
And it's not as large as what we have now. So people would know what you did or didn't do, most probably.
Well, so the first context, of course, is they're still in the desert,
Yeah.
right? This is just the people who are wandering through the desert right now. And, who knows how many, they say 10,000, 100,000, I forget what the number is. It probably wasn't really like huge, but there were a lot of people. But they all, they've been through a lot together. They all knew each other really well, right? But there were mechanisms for making sure that the community worked. Making sure that the community was taking care of each other and was maintaining the standards that this God that had saved them from slavery was imposing on them, right? And because they didn't want to get ditched in the middle of the desert. So one of the things that's real, this is just a complete aside thing, but I really love this, that Sinai was in the middle of nowhere. And Sinai was so in the middle of nowhere that nobody really knows where. If you go with a tour guide, they'll take you to Mount Sinai, but who knows, right?
It's on Beverly Glen.
Really? What?
Beverly Glen.
Beverly Glen and Olympic, or Beverly Glen and Santa Monica, or Beverly Glen and Wilshire. Oh my God, Sinai Temple. Sinai Temple.
Okay.
There it is.
Boy, that was a long walk. We thought it was long, but turns out it was even, and some swimming involved too, apparently. Right? But think of the force of that. There is no actual place on earth that can claim to be the place of the revelation. Nobody really knows where it was. It could so easily have, God could have waited till they got home, right? Till they got back to the land of Israel. But that's not where it happened. It happened before they get to the land of Israel, which means that revelation is for everywhere. It's not just for in the land of Israel. I think that's brilliant.
It was.
Didn't become a Mecca, it became.
Yes, exactly. We don't really, we sort of had a Mecca with the Temple Mount and everything, but it's a different dynamic. Let's not go there. Okay, Tamar Frankel is brilliant. If you come across anything she writes, and
Yeah,
Rabbi
she's one of my
Potok agrees with me, yes.
Yeah.
So she wrote, God introduces a subject that is most fundamental and most esoteric at the time, the korbanot, offerings or sacrifices by which we are brought near to God. The sages of Talmudic times began to modernize the korbanot for us. The sacrificial service, they said, should be replaced in a post-temple era by three things: tzedakah, our table, and prayer. Okay, this is the what now moment, right? The what now moment is there's no temple, it's been destroyed, we're in the land of Israel. This we have and that we have for a process. So it's a place where redefine the dynamic of our faith while so this is the last thing I want to burn. This is a passage is from the position to the idea that by offering animals on the altar, people could buy their way in God's love for sacrilege. To be pious towards heaven while being rapacious on earth seemed to them, as it seems to us, to pervert the very it is praying for the restitution of the sacrifices. Saying, I don't want your sacrifices, I want your hesed. And so we built a different musaf in the 20th century, 21st century. They're saying this. This has actually been what our prophets have been saying for because first of all, going back to that newspaper article, well, out, where's the cheshbon nefesh? Then does the Torah permit? Indeed, his name was Simcha Roth, by the way. I know it's a name you wouldn't know, but he was a really special person. Why then does the Torah permit, require sacrifice? It's obvious once we take seriously. The greatest gift a parent can give a child is the dignity able to give. It is not that the parent lacks anything or that the child is something. Its significance is that it's a gesture of love, of acknowledgement, thanksgiving with love. For a parenting child, that possibility, monumental act of humility. It is this gesture that is at the heart of the biblical institution. We're going to take something that originally was a gift from you, instead of keeping it, we're going to give it back to you to express our love for you and our desire to show you how important that is. What the conversation meant to be in the act of sacrifice. The Yud Hey Vav Hey, four-letter name of God, Hashem, and never the term Elohim, which expressed the idea of forces as creator or God as this. We talk about the immanent God, and we talk about the oh my God. The transcendent God, which is definition unmoved by human action or action. God created, God keeps the world spinning, God laid down some rules, and you are on your own. You do what you're supposed to do. If you want to lead a good life and feel closer, then you do this. And if you want to be on your own, then you're going to be on your own, and you're going to price being on your own. That's on one foot without a lot of big Rambam, right?
That seems a lot like a deism. That's what it is.
Yeah. Immanent God, the God of Abraham and Joshua, for example, right, is the God that's in my heart, the God that I feel, the God that if I reach out will respond to me, right? So, and both of those traditions and both of those perceptions of God are alive and well in Jewish tradition. So Heschel and Rambam are like the iconic representations of each of those concepts, but they are both actually expressing things that had been, those parallel lanes have been going on for forever. So so that's what that Rabbi Sachs is talking about here when he talked the difference between the Yud He Vav He and Elohim as these two things of God and what they represent in terms of these dynamics. Franz Rosenzweig got the difference between Gesetz, law, and Gebot, command. You can see it was German. Law is always impersonal, whereas command is personal, right? Law is the codex, it's out there in the background. Command is focused, it's pointed, it is directed at a particular person. You are commanded to is different than the codex that is the foundation of the society, right? Just a different dynamic. We obey law because of reason or interest. We obey a command because of our relation to the one who commands. Right? There, we need to feel if a command is directed to us, we need to feel some sort of connection to whoever is commanding. We need to an allegiance to whoever is doing commanding. Whether it's, I don't know, even, the United States government will pay taxes, right? We are acknowledging certain authority to which we are behind. God says, right? We are doing those repeated recognition of the personal presence of God at the heart of its collective life. It is a way of paying homage to the lawgiver, not just obeying the law. There's a huge difference in the dynamic. There's a huge difference in how to feel engaged this whole network, right? And I think that a lot of people who don't identify with the framework of halakha, who don't identify with the traditional life, pull away from God has role in life. It's way easier to say, yes, this being this dynamic is part of my neshama, and so, and I make a commitment to do whatever that is. And the other thing about this is there's a general acknowledgement that it's a process. You have to jump in and do 613 commandments all at once. You kind of like step by step, you learn a little bit more. This speaks to me, I'm going to commit to this. And this looks like really interesting. I'm going to do this for a while and see how this works out for me. One of the things that also I you know, it's black or white, you're in or out, you're good, right? There's very little of this dynamic of about encouragement. It's mostly about this is going to enrich your life. It's mostly about I'm making a list of 613 commandments. And Father, and okay,
Because the way.
it says you're muted.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right.
Narrow that down a little bit. It's kind of a broad topic.
Ramban,
Right, yeah, the list, right, the list. So, yeah, so I never patience to figure out what Ram instead of Israel Ramban took out in order to.
There could have been other
This is such a fantastic example of. And why did Rambam, Rambam was in Spain and he traveled east and he got to the land of Israel and he didn't decide who to move on. Okay. So second to last, we'll bring sacrifice, right? You see karov in there, right? That's to bring close. Lahakriv, the biblical sacrifice means to bring something close. Korban, a sacrifice, is that brought close. The entire biblical understanding of sacrifice is that it is an answer to the fundamental existential question of humanity in the face of the infinite. How can we come close to God, who is vaster than the universe and beyond time? From a human perspective, the act of sacrifice is a process of opening ourselves to God by renouncing something of ourselves. We bring a gift of affection to a parent. We offer something in our possession, our power, our will, our self-sufficiency. We engage in a symbolic act of renunciation. We acknowledge sacrifice is the primal act. If you think about whether you have, if you have ever blessed with a relationship, however,
Oh, boy.
Every minute or second.
if you need to talk, make it simple. Yes. We cannot begin to understand the sacrificial system in Judaism without seeing it as the way God allowed his people to be God. This is, I think, amazing. This idea, like God's lonely, God's right? That's some food, and if you do some sacrifice,
God.
or the God wouldn't be angry and zap you, right? But if there wasn't this concept that for our love, God is looking for us. That is, and it's not just standing in the corner and praying, but which one does, as one does, but being able to do it in a minion of people who you see over and over again is just like,
God is seen as the parent because you God to the parents here,
mhm.
and it's a very close approximation to the parent.
Sure.
Last two paragraphs.
Look, God ultimately is the source of life, which is what parents are. So it's
Yes.
not a leap. It's actually a very logical sort of parallel lane, right?
That is it. Imminent, I am,
Be you know, jocular about it, humorous, but it's God is here, and all we have to do is keep calling.
no, you leave it.
Keep calling.
Right here.
Is
I've
God,
had
God
good
there,
answers.
God's list,
Here's a response.
you might, well, yes.
So the desire today of some who want the third temple and return to the sacrifice. When the understand, I believe it's not, it's in place as a way to be parallel to everybody else going on, but then start separating, because that's what they were doing, but it's not something that is to be pursued in and of itself. It's the concept of one way of bringing, or which is now converted into prayer. So I think it's kind of interesting, confusing to hear there is this desire to turn to animal sacrifices, because it's like, not, that's not, we've evolved. It's about evolution, not about the world act. So
Right, so we'll,
in there, I just don't know. how to
that's why in
format it.
our Siddur, we are not, we are not praying for,
Prominent photograph October 7th of a IDF soldier wearing tefillin, carrying his armaments, and to God or whatever. And in a way, it feels like a sacrifice. He's putting himself in a place that's seeking help.
God willing, this kid came home.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain, look, the army has secular, Orthodox, conservative, everybody, right? So they go into the army with their particular head, right? But yeah, I mean, very much about just, I feel like what I'm is something that God is expecting me to do, and something that I'm doing out of my allegiance to my people. And yeah.
One more thing, my son doesn't, he got beautiful tefillin in Israel. He's a naturist of sorts. He doesn't want to use leather and frame.
Right.
So is there another option?
An option to.
No, yeah, an option.
Yeah, so no.
Yes.
Has to ask, believe me. The closest, the best answer with forgiveness is
What he has.
Right, so he
Well,
already has
but
a
he
very
has-
No, that's what he did.
I have a question.
Things are-
He could use your old
Goes
picture.
to the
On turning the page back over, and it says that the sacrificial service should be replaced by, when the tzedakah, is that the tithing? Is that considered the tithe? Because my kids tithe.
yeah,
Is that,
the tithing only works in the land of Israel.
oh, really?
Yes.
Or in the church.
Well,
Well, my
Um,
kids tithe. I mean,
here,
yeah,
What do you mean they tithe? What does that mean?
They make donations.
Percent.
10%.
That's
Charity.
very nice.
okay.
Who did they
lovely.
give it to?
The laws it's about. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming Jewish organizations or
Think
Jewish,
Or nature.
Whatever.
Or whatever.
they were. I mean, I'd have to find out whether they're still doing. I mean, when they were Orthodox, they were. Now they went back to conservative. I don't know whether
Mazel tov.
they. Knock on wood. But we're very Orthodox. They were. So I asked Sarah whether they're still maintaining that.
mean it only works in Israel.
There's a set of laws that are called arts. And some percentage of that was meant to be put into the hands of the Kohanim and the Levin. And there are communities that still what they do with that food is that was only in the yeah. There would be a third temple that is something on the Temple Mount, and just I mean the political piece of and the theological piece of that is just appreciating. But if it were to happen, be like crazy Art Kohanim guys and the Haredim and who knows what they could.
And you couldn't go.
I wouldn't want to.
There's also that, right?
And what is our table? How do we define that?
Put on your table. The fact that you're doing kashrut, that you're saying hamotzi, that you're saying that you're doing birkat hamazon, all of those origins of what happens in and around and on your table.
Because as a kid, it
Like one of their favorites is chicken and butter. Because the Ethiopians left, those Jews, chicken was still part of it, basically, right? It was, yes. Kind of falls apart, so they got shoved into the same category as beef and lamb.
That's a very different than I was as a kid.
You get what they tell you.
They didn't talk about eating.
No, that's true. I don't
No,
think
really?
the flesh of chicken
Mhm.
look like the
Yeah.
flesh of a different animal, so we
Yeah.
just put it with.
Like axle, right? Yeah, but I think it was also the sacrifice piece. The Ethiopian,
That's
that's
interesting.
fascinating. When I was at Schechter, when I was still in rabbinical school, we ran classes for Ethiopian who had been in it long enough to speak Hebrew, because the whole all rabbinic Judaism was like news. They never heard of it. They were like keeping biblical Judaism in Ethiopia, right? So so I taught some liturgy to this class of Ethiopian Jews, and so one of the great moments was we're looking at Kriyat Shema U'Birchoteh, and V'ahavta, and the last paragraph, Shema, with the Tzitzit. I see one of my students is, like the page and looking at print on the bottom and looking all over the place. And I said, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "Looking for where it says it's only for me."
Well, maybe think.
So fascinating to teach them because it was seeing all of this fresh eyes without all the assumptions of what we grew up with. Yeah.
But they wanted to learn and redo.
Oh, yeah. They wanted to learn, they wanted to understand these crazy Jews who were doing things they never heard of, and principles and laws. So, yeah, and they wanted to be able to walk into so they were very interested in the class. Felt good, yes.
But did they switch their practices? Do they still eat chicken with butter? Or just some? Yeah.
Are still doing the chicken and butter thing.
Sounds good.
There's vegan butter now.
And there's vegan butter.
Vegan
now.
butter.
How
Oh.
about the
Well,
milk and
margarine,
chicken?
right.
I mean, margarine now.
Yeah. Or oil.
not the same.
I mean, there's other ways that probably
I
tastes
know.
better with the butter.
Believing I know.
That will remain. The realm of theory.
I'm
for
so
me.
sorry to interrupt this. There's a hamantash that is happening. Here,
Thank
and I.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have,
I'm
I have,
so glad.
I have a follow-up question from